David Cann here with another question from the question bank in the style of what you find in Chapter 1H of your Hayes and Harris Math SL textbook. In this question, we're dealing with inverse functions. We have a function here, and it says that the function is only valid when x is greater than or equal to 0. When x is greater than or equal to -1. If x is less than -1, then we have a negative number in the radical. We're going to be taking the square root of a negative number, and that's something that we won't be doing. The question says, first, determine the inverse function of f of x. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite the function to be more familiar. And I'll say that it's f of x is equal to the square root of x plus 1. Now, I haven't actually found the inverse yet. I'm just rewriting what's given to me. That and that are the same. I guess I should note that x should be greater than or equal to -1. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the inverse function. And to do that, I swap my variables. F of x becomes x, and x becomes the inverse of f of x. So f of x is x, and we get the square root of f of x plus 1. The inverse of f of x plus 1. So this is the expression that's going to give me the inverse of the function. What I need to do is solve it for the inverse of f of x. To do that, I'm going to square both sides. And then I'll just have to subtract 1 to the other side. Alright. And this gives me the inverse of f of x. Alright, part B says, what is the domain of the inverse of f of x? And this, I love this question because it's so devious. There's nothing in this expression which suggests that there's any limitation on x. Just taken by itself, it looks like the domain is all real numbers. But what we have to do is we have to keep in mind context. We have to keep in mind what this is. And it's not just any function. It's the inverse of this function. And this function has a limitation. Let's take a look at what it looks like graphed. Here's the line y equals x, and here is f of x. And remember, x is not allowed to be less than -1. So it's only valid for values of x greater than -1. Which means that when we flip this about the y equals x axis, we don't get anything over here. We just get a line which looks like that. That's the inverse of f of x. So it doesn't have any values for which x is less than 0. So the domain for the inverse of f of x is the set of values x for which x is greater than 0. It's only valid for values of x in this region. There's nothing over here. And that's because of what the graph represents, not because of any quality of the equation itself. It's because it is the inverse of this green line.